Episode 34, Chapter 32. Chapter 32.
Actually, Sir Link,
said Princess Zelda,
I think that it would be better if I progressed alone from here. My meeting with the Rito Elder pertains to some important details regarding trade and political alliances. It would not do for me to have someone unneeded present.
They stood together on the landing, just a short while before the stairs that led up to the utmost level of Rito village. Their first trip together had been just as uncomfortable as he had originally feared. Indeed, since their brief stop at the ancient tech lab and Link's apparent blunder, they had spoken very little to each other. She rode ahead while he remained a few paces behind. At night, Link had silently made camp for her while she usually took time to utter her evening prayers, and then they ate a quiet meal together before she retired for the evening. Link had never felt so uniquely uncomfortable around another person in his life, and that was truly an accomplishment all to itself. The rift between them appeared impassable. He couldn't be sure if she was lying about her meeting with the Rito Elder, but he suspected she was. Nothing she said prior to this moment had indicated this was anything beyond a routine visit to speak with the Elder regarding some simple matters. The primary reason for their visit had been to see the divine beast Va Meadow and speak with Rivali about his comfortability controlling it, but as he had not been present at the village when they arrived, the princess decided to get her meeting with the Elder out of the way. He didn't want to cause an argument by bringing this up, however. In truth, he would have greatly preferred not to go see the village Elder and his attendants, anyway. The stares and, at times, outright hostility that he had received upon entering the village left Link feeling quite content to wait on this deserted porch.
Well, I shall take your silence to mean you do not object.
Princess Zelda spoke with a haughty tone, and Link's cheeks grew warm. Before he could say anything, however, she turned and made her way up the stairs. Sighing softly, Link turned and walked to the small rail at the edge of the porch. It hung out over the many levels of Rito village beneath it, overlooking Lake Toturi and the Hebra mountain range further north. Like many other of these landings, the rail had two openings on either side of the center to allow the Rito to use them as take-off points for flight. It was chilly here. Much colder here than in central Hyrule, though he reflected that it would not be so long before the seasons would change. He wondered how the harvest back in Hateno village would proceed this year. He doubted he would be able to travel back to the village in order to oversee and assist with it, as he had in the past. Not with his new duties. Not with the sword on his back. A breeze began to blow past Link, and he resisted the urge to shiver. He should have brought his cloak. The wind continued to pick up, and after a few seconds, he frowned. The wind was swirling around him almost like a whirlwind. It grew stronger, and Link took several steps back. Suddenly, a spinning form burst up from underneath the landing, carried by the whirlwind. The figure spread apart his wings, ceasing his upward motion, and to Link's surprise, the wind ceased immediately as well. Rivali, the Rito champion, wore clothing that was similar, though noticeably more ostentatious than the normal clothing worn by Rito. Rather than just colored fabric stretched over his breast, he wore a thin piece of metal with swirling designs etched into it. His midsection was covered by a deep red cloth, and the skirt that he had around his waist had gold trim that matched the expertly crafted bow on his back. His champion's garment wrapped around his neck like a scarf, hanging down in front in just such a way as to show the stylized image of the Rito divine beast to anyone looking at him. He landed on the rail where Link had been standing, his long talons gripping the wood with ease, as he gazed down at Link, smirking.
Impressive, I know. Very few can achieve a true mastery of the sky, yet I have made an art of creating an updraft that allows me to soar.
He paused, fixing Link with his green eyes, waiting. Likely waiting for me to say something stupid, like after the ceremony, Link thought. He kept his mouth firmly shut. Rivali sighed.
It is considered to be quite the masterpiece of aerial techniques, even among the Rito. With the proper utilization of my superior skills, why, I really see no reason why we couldn't easily dispense with Genin.
Still, Link said nothing. He stood still, watching Rivali, yet trying to feign a nonchalant posture. The truth was that Link did not care for the Rito champion. He thought that Rivali had his head so far up in the clouds that he couldn't see the fields beneath him, as Link's mother often said. He was arrogant and smug, and often built himself up by pushing others down. Rivali was, in short, an ass. He also didn't seem to care much for Link either, considering the barely veiled insults that he continually flung at Link during their brief time together at the castle several weeks prior. Rivali hopped down from the rail, folding his wings behind his back in a strangely formal manner, walking forward.
Now then, my ability to explore the firmament is certainly of note.
He stopped beside Link, his eyes and the muscular of his face still forming that smirk as before. He turned and placed a wing across Link's shoulders, pulling closer.
But let's not, pardon me for being so blunt, let's not forget that I am the most skilled archer among all the Rito.
He removed his wing from Link's shoulder, and Link tried to force himself to remain relaxed. Hylia, what is his problem? Rivali's smirk faded some, and he stepped around behind Link, slowly circling him. He continued speaking as he rounded back into Link's view.
Yet despite these truths, it seems that I have been tapped to merely assist you.
He held one finger out, pointing it at Link's face. Link took a steadying breath. Steady. Stay silent. It wouldn't be good to get into an argument with the Rito champion in the middle of his home.
All because you happen to have that little darkness sealing sword strapped to your back.
Rivali withdrew his hand, gazing at his blue feathers thoughtfully.
I mean, it's just asinine.
Link's fingers twitched, and his expression must have shown something of his dark thoughts, because Rivali glanced at him. His eyes narrowed, all traces of his earlier smugness gone.
Unless you think you can prove me wrong.
Rivali suddenly stepped closer to Link, thrusting his face forward so that they were mere inches apart. Link refused to give any ground, meeting Rivali's eyes with a glare of his own.
Maybe we should just settle this one.
His eyes remained fixed on Link's for another moment, daring Link to act. Finally, he pulled away, reaching up and stroking his long, hooked beak with a feathered hand.
But where?
How angry would the princess be if I punched him? Would it be hard to find another Rito champion if he quit? Or broke a wing? Both wings.
Oh, I know. How about up there?
He spun around, thrusting a wing up to the air to point at the flying divine beast Va Meadow, flying overhead with the help of its spinning propellers. Rivali turned back to Link, eyes widening.
Oh, you must pardon me.
His smirk returned, and Link set his jaw. His teeth began to ache dully.
I forgot that you have no way of making it up to that divine beast on your own.
Link remained resolute in his silence. He wouldn't give Rivali the satisfaction of knowing just how irritating he was. Rivali likely knew, though. His expression betrayed mirth and satisfaction. Finally, Rivali turned his back to Link again and spread his wings. He bent his knees, wings hovering just over the wooden floor, and suddenly, the whirlwind began to swirl around him as before. The sudden gale forced Link to step back as dust and debris sprayed his face. Rivali looked at Link over his shoulder, voice dripping with disdain, just barely audible over the wind.
Good luck sealing the darkness.
And, with a mighty flap of his wings, he rose with the whirlwind, spinning briefly before shooting out the top of the column of air and flying into the sky to reach the divine beast. Link watched as Rivali departed, clenching his fist tightly by his side. Eventually, the gale died, and he was left in silence. Link blinked as awareness of his surroundings returned. He had spent the morning with Cass and his family, but he eventually expressed an interest in finding and speaking with Tiva. Cass offered to escort him, but Link had asked for directions, instead. Now that Cass was finally back with his family, Link didn't feel right constantly taking him away. Tiva, it would seem, had a home on the same level as the Rito Elder, though further around in the opposite direction. As he had made the climb, passing by countless Rito, he could sense the unease that pervaded the populace. Rito adults looked up at the flying divine beast with despondent expressions, parents snapped at children for making too much noise, and most of the Rito avoided walking out onto the boardwalks as much as possible, choosing to stay inside of their huts. To make matters even worse, he also sensed anger. Division. It was subtle, and he hadn't noticed it on his first walk up to the top of the spire with Cass, but now that he was alone and able to pay better attention, he could see it. Youthful Rito that paced, wearing various weapons and bows or gathered together in small groups to whisper. Older Rito that watched Link pass by, expressions inscrutable. The Rito city felt like it was about to pop. It was far bleaker here than he had initially thought. As Link had neared the uppermost level of Rito village, he paused beside a landing, much like those below, though this one had a Rito emblem emblazoned upon it with white paint. Looking at it, he realized that it was the same emblem as was on his paraglider. He could remember the king telling him that it had been made of Rito fabric. As he looked down at the landing, he was struck by an even greater familiarity with the location, and crossed over to lean against the railing, gazing out towards the distant Hebra mountains while considering the feeling. He eventually remembered why it was so familiar to him, but after seeing the memory, he wasn't sure if he was particularly happy about it.
I had no idea that Rivali was so.
Link searched for the right word but ultimately decided to leave it at that. It didn't feel right to disparage the dead. But the memory left him feeling agitated. Not quite to the same degree as the recent memory with Princess Zelda had, but this memory had been prior to that one, hadn't it? It was growing difficult for Link to keep track of the internal timeline in his mind. This one had been just a few weeks after the champion ceremony. After he had saved the princess and been made her knight, but before they had ventured to Death Mountain. Before they stopped at the lighthouse in Akala. He wondered where the memory at the shrine took place. It had to be before the memory at the Shrine of Power, right? But try as he might, Link couldn't quite sort them out in his head. He thought that it likely did, but he had nothing that could truly reconcile the two memories together. The pages of his life remained scrambled. Link sighed heavily, leaning against the railing. Damn. He had more important things to worry about than his scrambled emotions and thoughts. There was another divine beast for him to defeat. Another ally to free. He wondered what the Rivali would say when he saw Link.
Who are you?
A voice behind him caused Link's back to stiffen, and he turned to see a youthful-looking Rito. He, like many of the Rito, stood taller than Link. Really, did all of the races of Hyrule stand taller than Hylians? He had green feathers with a hint of blue and a pair of braids that hung down on either side of his face. Golden eyes looked at Link with a mixture of curiosity and annoyance.
I'm Link. What are you doing here?
Link's eyebrows turned down slightly as he took in the Rito's expression and tone.
I was just looking up at the divine beast. Usually, I'm the only one here. I think everyone else is afraid to come up this high anymore.
The Rito considered for a second before sitting down on the ground, reclining back on one wing while resting his other on his bent knee.
You one of the lumberjacks? No.
The Rito, who Link thought seemed to be, at most, a young adult, looked at him curiously. Finally, he looked up at the flying automaton and grimaced.
I hate it here.
What? Link remained silent, not at all sure who the Rito was or why he was even talking to him. He should just continue up to find Tiba. That was the right thing to do. Link took a step forward, intending on doing just that.
I know my mom wants me to take over the shop one day, but I hate it here. This whole place is just boring. Boring?
Link asked, slightly incredulous.
Aren't you being terrorized by the divine beast? Well, yeah. But not really terrorized. I don't know. It usually just flies around up there. We can't do much flying when it's around, but...
The Rito shrugged the shoulder he wasn't leaning against.
It just seems like... that wouldn't be very boring. I guess. I think I'm just sick of being here. I don't hate the idea of being a merchant. Not really. Just not here. I want to sell more than wheat and sugar. I don't want to work in the same place I was born at. Why don't you just leave?
Link asked, growing irritated at the young Rito. Didn't he have more important things to worry about than this?
Where would I go? I wouldn't want to go someplace really hot like the desert. There's several towns out east. Hylian and Sheikah towns.
The Rito considered that for a moment before shaking his head.
And I bet they already have a bunch of regular merchants already. It'd take a lot of work to try to establish myself. No, I'm probably just going to spend my whole life here. Die here.
Link sighed, shaking his head.
Alright, well.
He trailed off, not knowing the youth's name. The Rito glanced at him.
Faison.
Faison? Link hesitated, looking down at the Rito. But he shook himself a moment later.
Well, Faison, I've got to go. I need to meet with someone. Oh, okay. See ya.
He raised his wing, and Link walked past him, glancing back with a frown. It wasn't his business, really, but the Rito's selfishness bothered Link. With all the troubles facing his people, one would think he would care about something else. Link stopped, a thought occurring to him. Oh, damn. That's what he had been doing, wasn't it? dwelling on the hurts caused by Princess Zelda and the irritations he had felt at Rivali. Meanwhile, Meadow flew overhead, slowly choking the life out of the Rito. Divine beast Vonaboris was in the south, and Ganon raged in the castle, threatening to break free at any time. And all I can think about is how the princess yelled at me. He was a fool. Selfish. Petulant. As bad as he had been shortly after awakening, when he had complained to Impa. I deserve another slap. He closed his eyes, pursing his lips. The memories hurt, it was true, but he couldn't worry about that right now. They were a distraction. In time, more memories would return. Perhaps he would discover how he and the princess eventually got over their animosity towards each other. Maybe he and Rivali would end up best of friends. And, if not, well, 100 years was a long time to hold a grudge. Link opened his eyes and glanced back up at Meadow. That was his primary concern. Everything else could wait. He stepped forward again, feeling a renewed purpose as he began climbing the steps to the higher level. It did not take Link long to reach Tiba's home from Rivali's landing. The higher Link climbed the spire, the fewer Rito he found milling about. The greatest concentration of homes and shops were further down the spire, true, but he also found numerous empty huts and structures on the uppermost levels. He suspected that fear of Meadow drove some of the populace further down. Tiba remained, however, as did the elder. When he walked up to Tiba's hut, Link found him inside, though he looked as though he was preparing to leave, standing by the doorway with his back to Link. He was speaking to a lavender-colored female Rito, who had her wing wrapped around a child.
Look,
Tiba said, his voice gruff.
I'm not going anywhere tonight. I'm just going down to check on Hearth.
The female Rito's expression showed worry.
I know, but after what happened earlier, I'm not just going to stand by and let us be terrorized by that thing, Saki. Today was just a setback. What about Canali's orders?
The female Rito, whom Tiba called Saki, glanced past Tiba and spotted Link. She opened her beak, but Tiba spoke over her.
If that old man thinks I'm just going to sit on my tail feathers and do nothing, then he's a bigger fool than I thought.
Tiba's voice began to rise, anger apparent in his tone and posture.
I'm the greatest warrior that we have. I'm going to bring that thing down or I'll die trying.
The child's eyes widened, and Saki pulled him closer.
Tiba.
Tiba hesitated, glancing down at the boy under Saki's wing.
Every warrior must face the possibility of his death, Tulin. You'll need to remember that.
He held the child's eyes until, finally, the boy named Tulin nodded, though he still looked terrified.
Tiba, this is reckless. Enough.
Tiba swept his wing through the air, and Saki snapped her beak shut.
I'll return shortly.
Tiba turned around before Saki could get another word in and came face to face with Link. He met Link's eyes, his stare fierce, before grunting.
So you finally arrived. I thought you fled after speaking to Canali.
Link remained still, meeting Tiba's eyes and trying to project some form of confidence.
I need to get aboard the Divine Beast.
The Rito considered him for a moment before replying.
Then I guess you had better learn how to fly.
He pushed past Link onto the walkway that rounded the spire. Link sighed and spun, following Tiba, who walked with a determined gait. Link found that he had to hurry to keep up.
You said that you wanted my help.
Tiba glanced at Link as he walked down the stairs.
No, I said that I wanted information. I will be the one dealing with the Divine Beast. I've already defeated 2 of them. Great, so you can tell me how to defeat this one.
Link reached out, grabbing Tiba's wing to stop him. Tiba yanked his wing free, fixing Link with a dangerous glare. Link took a deep breath.
Look, we can help each other. You want to help your village and keep your family safe, right? I need to get aboard the Divine Beast to destroy the creature controlling it.
Tiba turned and continued down the path. Link clenched a fist and followed, passing by Faizan, who still sat on Rivali's landing.
Why?
Tiba asked as Link caught up to him.
Why? The Divine Beast is being controlled. If I kill the creature inside, then it won't be a threat to your people anymore. No, if I destroy its weapons, it won't be a threat. Even better if I bring the entire thing down. But you want to take control of it, why? To defeat Ganon.
Tiba stopped walking, looking at Link.
To defeat Ganon. Yes. I am freeing each of the divine beasts in order to use them against Ganon. Who are you?
Tiba asked, eyes narrowing.
I'm the Hylian champion from 100 years ago.
Link met his eyes.
From 100 years ago. Yes, I was resurrected after I...
Tiba turned and continued walking. Link felt his face grow hot, and he hurried after Tiba again. They made their way down several levels of Rito village, finally arriving at another occupied hut. This one was positioned next to a bridge that crossed over to another, smaller flat-top spire that rose from the base of the main spire. What looked like a blacksmith's forge sat atop the spire, though Link saw no one working the forge at this time. Tiba stepped into the hut, and Link followed, seeing a pair of Rito within. One of them was an adult male with dark gray, almost black feathers. His right wing was wrapped tightly in white fabric and held in a sling. Each of his shoulders were, likewise, covered in white bandages, and it looked to Link that many of his feathers had been charred, though it was difficult to tell with their dark coloring. The other was a Rito child, no older than Cass' daughters, with bright pink feathers, who sat on the floor with a book open in her lap.
Tiba,
the dark-feathered Rito that Link assumed to be Hearth said as they entered. He started to stand, but Tiba waved at him to sit back down.
How is the wing?
Tiba said, sitting down on the floor across from him.
Broken.
Hearth lifted the wing slightly, wincing.
It's going to take me a while before I'm able to work the forges again.
Hearth's eyes fell on Link as he entered, and he gave Tiba a confused look. Tiba sighed.
He's here to help with the divine beast.
Hearth laughed bitterly, but his laughter gave way to coughing a moment later. The little girl looked up from her book, frowning. When Hearth's coughs subsided, he spoke again.
A little late for that. Yeah, well, I'm not done with it yet.
Hearth grunted, looking at Tiba with a hard expression. He considered for a long time before nodding.
I figured.
Both of the Rito men fell silent, and Link glanced down to see the Rito child looking at them with a worried expression. Hearth noticed her a moment later and sighed.
Molly, why don't you give us a few minutes? Go play but don't go far. Where I can see you.
The little girl looked uncertainly between the three men before nodding. She grabbed a doll from a shelf and hurried out of the hut onto the walkway just outside. Hearth watched her go, protectively, before looking back at Tiba.
So. Going back to the flight range.
Tiba nodded.
I'll go tomorrow. Can't fly there as long as Meadow is overhead, so I'll go on foot. And your friend?
Tiba sighed and glanced back towards Link, fixing him with a hard stare. Finally, he nodded to the ground beside him, and Link sat down.
How did you defeat the other divine beasts? You said it's being controlled by something.
Link launched into an explanation of the creatures and spirits that he had encountered on the other two divine beasts.
You're telling me that the spirit of Rivali is still somehow up there? And you're going to save him by destroying whatever mythical demon that inhabits Meadow?
Tiba said after Link finished.
Yes.
Tiba grunted and glanced at Hearth, who looked equally as uncertain. Link reached down to pull out his Sheikah slate, opening it and navigating to the gallery rune. He found the image of him and Princess Zelda, gathered with all of the other champions. He turned it around to show the Rito.
Proof that I am who I say I am.
Tiba raised an eyebrow, looking from the photograph to Link's face.
You don't look too much like the guy in that photo right now.
Link raised a hand, feeling at the hair that covered his cheek. It hadn't grown as fast as he would have liked, but he was sporting a beard and a shorter haircut now.
There were complications. I had to disguise myself while traveling west. Right.
Tiba looked back at Hearth again and, finally, sighed.
Okay, let's say you somehow are the Hylian champion from 100 years ago. Skies, let's even say that you're right and that Rivali's spirit is up there, waiting to retake control of Meadow the moment you kill the thing inside of it. That doesn't change the fact that the thing still tries to blast anyone that doesn't have their feet on the ground. Tell me about its defenses,
Link said.
What does it use?
Tiba and Hearth explained the divine beast's methods of defending itself. Then, together, the three of them put together a strategy for defeating it. It was a foolhardy plan, to be sure. It would leave them both exposed than either would like, and any number of things could go wrong. But it was a plan. Link returned to Cass' home, only to find that Cass wasn't there. According to Emily, he had taken his daughters to practice singing. Curious, Link got directions from her and soon found him and his children on a viewing platform of sorts a few levels up. As he approached, he began to hear hints of music floating on the air. Cass was there, with his concertina, rocking back and forth as he played a song for his daughters, who stood in a line before him, arranged from the tallest and eldest to the shortest and youngest. The 5 girls sang along with Cass' song, each seeming to sing a slightly different part that came together to form a cheerful chorus. It was quite beautiful. After a few moments, Cass stopped playing, considering.
Genli, why don't you and Kots swap parts? I want you to try singing the melody with knots. Kots, try the harmony. I think it will better fit your range. Kree, you sounded as though you were having trouble finding the right key.
He played a long, sweet note on his instrument, humming with it.
Do you hear it?
He hummed again, and this time, Kree joined him, her voice wavering briefly before matching his.
Good. Keep that.
He looked to his youngest daughter, standing at the end of the line, and opened his mouth to speak, but then he caught sight of Link. He smiled broadly and waved Link forward.
Ah, welcome. I wondered when you would return. We were just practicing our singing. I found out that my daughters haven't been practicing nearly as regularly as I instructed in my absence.
The youngest of Cass' daughters stuck her tongue out at him, and Cass chuckled softly. He looked back to Link.
I trust you spoke with Tiba. Yeah, but we can talk about that later,
Link said, leaning against the railing.
Do you mind if I watch? Not at all.
Cass turned back to his daughters and lifted his beak, standing straighter. They all followed his lead, and when he began playing, their voices soon joined his song. Cass, too, soon began to sing along with them in his deep baritone. Link smiled warmly as he watched his friend sing. Cass was even more animated than usual, playing joyfully and swaying with the music. During a couple of the songs they played, his eldest daughter began to play a small handheld harp along with Cass, and another of his daughters began to play a small pan flute. A small group of Rito gathered as their impromptu concert continued. Link saw Emily near the front, but he also saw Tiba's wife and their son, though Tiba was nowhere to be seen. The crowd grew as the afternoon gave way to twilight, with many seated on the floor of the platform and walkways. Link looked up and saw quite a few pairs of Rito feet hanging down from the next level up as well, as more sat there and listened. The music seemed to transform the Rito before Link's eyes. Where, before, many of them had seemed downtrodden and hopeless, he now saw smiles on their faces. They spoke to each other eagerly, and a few even called out song requests. Cass took it all in stride, as did his daughters, who clearly enjoyed making music with their father. Eventually, the music ended after the sun had set. Many of the crowd had returned to their homes, as had Emily with 3 of their daughters, leaving only Cass and his 2 eldest daughters. Cass set his concertina down into its case, as the crowd dispersed. Several of the Rito came forward to thank Cass for his music, but very soon the only ones left were Link, Cass, and his daughters. Cass embraced his daughters tightly, rubbing his cheek against the tops of their heads.
Go on. I'll be home soon. I'm going to speak with Mr. Link for a time.
The 2 girls hurried off in the direction of their home, and Cass watched them go with a fond expression. When they were out of sight, he turned to Link.
It feels good to sing with them again. It is difficult to realize just how much you will miss something until it is gone.
He approached the railing and leaned against it, looking out. Link did likewise, resting his elbows against the rough wood.
I think I know a thing or two about that,
he said. Link thought of Mipha and Daruk. How strange it was that he found that he missed their companionship. Their conversations. Their warmth. Cass hummed softly in acknowledgement, and they fell silent for a time longer. Link eventually broke the silence.
I found out that Rivali did not like me very much. A memory.
Link nodded.
The only clear memory I have of him involves him challenging me to a fight.
He smiled faintly, shaking his head.
I think I'm ready for some happier memories now. They'll come.
Cass patted Link on the shoulder.
Many journeys are tumultuous when they first begin. Personalities clash, tempers flare, and even close friends learn of new sides to each other. That all passes with time. I think you're right, but it's just...
Link sighed.
It's not like reading a book. I experience the moment as if reliving it anew. All of the thoughts, the emotions, they're all mine. They can be hard to shake. Of course. But I am confident that they will eventually get better. My teacher indicated that, with time, you two were inseparable. Rivali and I. You and the princess.
Link glanced up at Cass. The Rito had a knowing look in his eye, and Link felt his cheeks flush. When did the conversation turn from Rivali to Princess Zelda? He looked away again.
They eventually get bad again.
The deaths of their friends. The fall of the kingdom. His defeat.
Yes, but the story did not end there, did it? No. It didn't.
Link took a deep breath, standing up straighter. Cass did the same.
I'm going to be leaving with Tiba in the morning. We'll travel north to gather supplies, and then we're going to try to launch another attack on Meadow the day after. Yes, I assumed as much. I suspected Tiba would not be able to sit quietly and wait. I want you to stay here. With your family. Ah.
Link met the Rito's eyes. After their journey together through Hyrule Field, it felt strange to separate from him now, but it was the right thing to do.
I don't know what the divine beast is going to do when we attack it. Ruda used ice spikes, and Rudania tried burying us under a mountain of molten rock. They respond more viciously to me than they usually do to others, too. So you should be here, with your family. You can get them out, if Meadow poses a threat to the village. You can warn the others, too.
Cass watched him in silence for several seconds before speaking again.
I appreciate that, Link. I will stay. But you must be willing to give me a full accounting of the divine beast and whatever you find in it. Don't I always? Yes, but I want even more details this time. This is, after all, my patron divine beast. I am very curious about what you will find upon it.
Link smiled at Cass, agreeing. They remained where they were for a short time before, finally, they both departed, Cass to his own house, and Link to an inn in Rito village, where he was able to rent a hammock for the night. End of chapter.